Welcome back to the studio. You're watching Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Shona Bhattacharya. Here's a look at our top stories. In this edition, the political crisis continues in Gambia. President Jammeh has named a mediator to talk with the opposition while criticizing foreign mediation efforts. Ramping up security ahead of an Africa-France summit in Mali. Security forces are patrolling the streets in the hopes of avoiding an attack. 35 heads of state will be attending the summit that begins Friday. And just 3 days to go before the Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Gabon. 16 nations are vying for the top prize. Gambia sinks deeper into crisis. President Yahya Jammeh, who refuses to accept the results of the December 1st election, says he's appointed a mediator to meet with all parties. This as representatives from the West African regional ECOWAS bloc are expected to arrive in Banjul, the capital, on Friday. Jammeh has criticized their initiative as well as the threat to send in regional troops. He calls the level of foreign interference, quote, unprecedented, and has expelled 3 Senegalese journalists.
Our review and investigations have revealed an unprecedented level of foreign interference in our elections and internal affairs, and also a sustained smear campaign, propaganda, and misinformation.
Our guest on this topic is Dr. Michael Amoah, Research Associate at the Center of African Studies at SOAS in London. Thank you so much for joining us on France 24. Tell us, Professor, how do you think this crisis will end?
Well, the scenario we're looking at, President Jammeh says he wants this resolved constitutionally. And so we're talking about if there is no Supreme Court sitting this January, it's likely to be in May or even in November. We can't see, with the facts available on the ground, judging from the anomalies committed by the Electoral Commission, there's no way a Supreme Court can rule that Jammeh should step down. So practically, that's not going to happen. The ECOWAS and African Union mediators will be going to see Jammeh with one main proposal, that he should step aside, which Jammeh is not prepared to do. So in all practicality, we're looking at a scenario ahead where Jammeh would say he wants another election conducted.
Now, you've said before that ECOWAS's announcement, the regional bloc, their announcement that they'll send troops into Gambia if Jammeh does not step down, that is an empty threat. Why do you say that?
The ECOWAS threat to send troops, it's practically unlikely because we know their track record. In 2013, they made a lot of noise that they were going to send troops to Mali, and they did not. And in 2015, they made a lot of noise they were going to send troops to Burkina Faso, and they did not. It was only about 14 months since Burkina Faso. I cannot see ECOWAS being able to actually honor their promise or even a threat to send troops to Gambia. And in any case, if they did that, it's only going to cause more chaos and will not bring peace to the sub-region.
Preparing for the 27th Africa-France summit that opens this Friday, the meeting will take place in Bamako, the Malian capital. That's seen increased security measures. Some roads have been closed and hotels are under strict surveillance. Special anti-terrorism units have also been deployed to ensure security in light of the November 2015 terrorist attack on the Radisson Blu Hotel that left more than 20 people dead. Our correspondent on the ground brings you this report.
The Malian capital under tight surveillance. Hundreds of cameras will monitor the streets and beyond during the Africa-France summit. Live on these screens, security teams will watch the arrival of heads of state as they move from the airport to their hotels.
You can see a delegation on the screen. They leave here, and we pick them up here, at the roundabout. We follow them the whole way. You can see there's less than 30 meters between each surveillance point, between each police officer.
The tightest watch is being kept on hotels and the conference centre.
More than 10,000 men have been deployed for the whole mission. As you can see, the guard stretches from the airport to the hotels and the site of the conference. But it even goes along to the river.
Amongst the security personnel are 180 anti-terror specialists. The unit was created a year ago, following the deadly terrorist attack on Bamako's Radisson Blu Hotel.
We are very well prepared for the summit. Rapid response equipment is already in place close to hotels and the conference center. And at our headquarters, we have backup teams. So if there is a problem, we can be on site within 5 minutes.
It will be difficult for residents to get around the capital during the summit. On Friday, the majority of businesses and schools will be closed.
Let's take a look at what's making headlines elsewhere on the continent. Clashes broke out on the Tunisian side of the border with Libya at the town of Ben Guerdan, as well as at the border crossing at Ras Jadir. Several dozen protesters gathered outside official buildings, and according to a private radio, security forces intervened using tear gas after they were targeted by stone throwers. The protesters were demanding the free flow of trade with Libya that's mired in political chaos and fighting between militias. A new government in Ivory Coast. A day after naming new prime minister and vice president, President Alassane Ouattara named his new government team. It's smaller, with just 28 ministers and a secretary of state, compared with 35 posts previously. 7 new members were sworn in. The changes that correspond to constitutional changes voted through in November were delayed by a 2-day mutiny. Still, the defense and interior ministers both kept their jobs. Somalia's Mohamed Osman Jawari was re-elected as the country's parliament speaker in a first-round vote by the country's 259 MPs amid tight security. Somalia is now one step closer to organizing a presidential election as the head of state is chosen by lawmakers. That election has been pushed back several times, but officials say it will take place towards the end of this month. Kenya's main opposition parties are preparing for the country's presidential elections in August. Together, they're decided to field a single candidate in the hopes of unseating President Uhuru Kenyatta. That nominee will be supported by the new National Super Alliance that could pose a serious threat to the current administration. One of the contenders is former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who accused his opponents of rigging the election when he lost in 2007 and 2013. The Africa Cup of Nations kicks off this Saturday in Gabon. 16 national football teams from around the continent will be vying for the trophy in a bid to unseat Ivory Coast, the 2015 champions. France 24 sports editor Ketivan Gorgistani joins us on set. Hi, Ket. So tell us, who are the favorite teams for this tournament?
First of all, the team that you mentioned, the defending champions, of course, Ivory Coast, the overwhelming favorites for a repeat. That said, they do have a few key missing players. There's Yahya Touré. He was the star, the captain of this Ivorian team. He retired just a few months ago, so he won't be there. And of course, the man who was set to be replacing him as the captain, Gervinho, he's injured. He won't be there. That said, even without these players, they are on a nearly 2-year-long unbeaten run, so they will be a very tough team to beat. Another favorite, Algeria. They have a star duo, Leicester City duo, Islam Slimani, as well as Riyad Mahrez. Riyad Mahrez was named the African Player of the Year, though they also have some troubles. They've changed coaches 3 times in less than a year, so we'll see if they can get that together for this competition. And finally, Egypt, 7-time Africa Cup of Nations champions. They're making their big return. They hadn't shown up at the competition since 2010, of course, with the Arab Spring and the unrest in the country. And among their stars are Arsenal's Mohamed El Neni, as well as Roma winger Mohamed Salah. 2 other teams to watch still, Senegal and Ghana. Ghana, the 2015 finalist who lost on penalties against Ivory Coast.
Any key players to look out for?
Well, there will be 2 big stars, a kind of a duel between the local star, the star that Gabon is waiting for, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. He's the striker from Borussia Dortmund. He scored a goal in every single game this season for the German club, the top scorer of the Bundesliga, 21 goals in 23 matches for club and country. So he will be looking to shine in his home country. And then there's the man that I mentioned for Algeria, Riyad Mahrez, the 2016 African Football Player of the Year. He led Leicester City last season to that surprising Premier League title, but his form has a little bit dwindled in the past few months. We'll see if he can bring that back in Africa. And finally, Sadio Mane, the man who was the third on the podium for the African Player of the Year. He's from Senegal. He plays for Liverpool. He's done really well with the Reds. We'll see if he can do that with Senegal. And a couple of players to watch still. Serge Aurier, Ivory Coast, and André Ayew, the star for the Ghanaian team. These two teams and two players were there in 2015 for that final. And of course, André Ayew will be looking for revenge.
Thank you so much, Kitivan Gorgestani. We'll be keeping an eye on that. Together, that's it for this edition. Do stay tuned. There's more news coming up on France 24.